Welcome to Business Talk, and today we've got a really fascinating and critical discussion lined up about resilience and business continuity management. Now, can you just imagine what happens to your business if you go offline? If you're a consumer-facing business with an e-commerce platform, for example, just last week we had ChatGPT that was down for a while, and increasingly there is the risk of cybercrime as we see some very high-profile hacks recently in the South African market. Joining us is a leader in the field, Willem Olivier, who's the CEO of Resilient Innovations. He's got over 2 decades experience in BCM and resilience. Willem has also led significant initiatives and projects across multiple countries. And today he's going to be sharing insights into Resilient Innovations and how they're helping businesses stay resilient. So Willem, welcome to the show. I think it's probably one of the most critical issues. The Allianz top 10 risks recently, I think, cited business continuity and risks around cybercrime as one of its top 10 risks keeping CEOs awake at night.
Thank you, Michael. Absolutely. I must say that a lot of people would think that business continuity is not a big issue, but definitely the pandemic has shown us that and exactly what that transpired after a few years, and we're still seeing the impact of that in the whole world. And then also how it impacted supply chain, and those are the kinds of things that a lot of companies don't necessarily always think about. How's my supply chain impact? So it's definitely a massive topic, and a lot of companies that are registered on whether the JSE or have supply banks with services and products, they all have to have business continuity plans in place. They have to prove it. They've got to document these things. They've got to have disaster recovery in place. So it is a very, very relevant topic.
Yeah. Now, can you start by telling us a little bit more about Resilient Innovations? Because I know you were part of Dimension Data, and then you, as management, decided to do an MBO, management buyout, out of DD. Who is Resilient Innovations, and what do you do? What is your core purpose?
Okay. Well, I think a lot of people may have known the old ContinuitySA. That's been around since about 2000. That ContinuitySA is a massive, strong company, had a big brand, a big presence in Africa as well. Dimension Data acquired ContinuitySA in 2014, and we were integrated into DD in 2021. After that, the name change ContinuitySA dropped away, and we became part of the One DD strategy, which was then also changed by NTT, who's the owner of Dimension Data, 100% owner of the company. That's then on Telegraph and Telecom in Japan. And they decided that a lot of the companies within the DD portfolio are not necessarily part of their go-to-market strategy on a global basis. So they decided to divest in quite a number of organizations, which some of ours was one of them as well. Unfortunately, we could not take out the ContinuitySA brand out of DD, which was unfortunate because it's just such a strong brand and it had a very, very good reputation in the market. But what we decided is that as things have moved along in life, things were always disaster recovery in the past, where it was mainframe and large computer systems that used to be backed up. Then it became business continuity management. Now it's all part of building your resilience in your organization. It's not just your organization, but your people as well. And also to continue with your business continuity management implementations and developing a system around that, which includes obviously IT disaster recovery, the people to help your organization become robust. And that's why we got to the name Resilient Innovations. And our slogan is also to move beyond resilience, which I hope does trigger some questions with people. But that's how we got to the name, and that's where we are now. So we're going forward as a Resilient Innovations.
I remember now interviewing you with a flash mic, I think years ago at the campus in Bryanston. Now that the ContinuitySA bell is ringing there. So when you look at what you've done now, I mean, clearly that MBO must have been quite a transformative, quite a painstaking process to get all of the legals right. But now you've built this new brand, Resilient Innovations. What makes Resilient Innovations the right advisory partner for South African businesses in the BCM field?
Well, thank you for that, Michael. Yes, it was a painful process. It's just the amount of work that one has to do normally in a management buyout. It just takes time. It's part of the process. What differentiates us from the rest of companies that do advisory services or BSM advisory services, we back it up with infrastructure. So we've got a lot of technology infrastructure and as well as office infrastructure. But in terms of the advisory services, what comes with that, just between myself and one of the other directors, is over 40 years of experience in the business continuity industry. Both of us have traveled extensively in Africa and Middle East and Europe to develop BCM programs and help companies to set up programs. So apart from that, we also have a lot of our staff that we've retained over the years, been with us for many years. And that's where the institutional memory in terms of our DR capability remains. It's really strong. And we are trying to continue to develop that to ensure that we can transfer that knowledge down to the younger generation so that we can continue to build on our own resilience as an organization, to provide our services to our clients.
Yeah. And, when I think about disaster recovery, I think it must have evolved as we see businesses going into the cloud. With that comes maybe increased resilience on the one hand, but maybe greater risks on the other from a cyber perspective, and, having control over on-prem, servers versus something that now sits in the cloud. How does resilient innovation stay ahead of emerging trends? And maybe you could just talk to me about how you've seen, with all that institutional memory, the evolution of this idea of disaster recovery and building that redundancy and resilient DNA into a business.
Yeah, it's actually quite fascinating how things have changed, and I think South Africa as a country is definitely on the forefront of a lot of that in terms of if you compare ourselves to a European country, for argument's sake, where electricity is a given on a 24/7 basis, there's no issue with it. And I look back at it at maybe 10, 15 years ago, where companies didn't always have diesel generators. Everybody had nothing. They relied on Eskom power. And big organizations with big buildings, yes, they had that and have those things. But over the years, a lot of organizations have built their own resiliency in terms of adding a generator to their business. But then it adds another level of risk, because now you have to have diesel supply available. So that's your supply chain. It's now, in fact, something that you've got to monitor and check, because you've got your own diesel generators, you've got to maintain these machines, etc. So that's the kind of thing that a lot of organizations have done, and we've seen that as well. We've also seen things where it's the change from, because of COVID, where the work from home impacted us and Teams became such a fantastic product to use. And all of a sudden, things like our syndicated seating as a product is basically started to dwindle a little bit, but it's still picking up. It's still selling it. And it's changed, however, in terms of the type of organizations that do take up, for instance, syndicated seating. But on our side, we've developed our buildings with dual generators, dual UPSs, air conditioning systems continue to run. Even with generators, we have supply chain backup upon backup. And also in terms of our buildings, all of our buildings have multiple links. Each of those buildings, we have most of the ISPs in South Africa terminate all of their services in our buildings, which our clients can use. And all of these buildings are interconnected with each other. So we have full triangulated redundancy in our data technology that we have between our buildings to ensure that we provide the connectivity to our clients. Also, what we've done is to build out on the different vendors, so that we're not a product agnostic or vendor. We are product agnostic or vendor agnostic. So we have multiple suppliers for the services.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be key, because you don't want to be locked into any risk from one particular supplier, one particular vendor. And listening to you talk about that, it reminds me that I think sometimes we think of resilience and we think of continuity, and we think they're the same thing. So when you think of business continuity, having a diesel generator just to be able to ensure that you can continue trading. But resilience, in the way you're describing it, is certainly something far deeper than that. Do you find often businesses sometimes conflate the two, just business continuity versus what resilience actually means from a broader perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. The in what we've seen also, my own experiences about this in a lot of the countries that I've worked in, is that it'd be similar like a tick sheet for somebody, for some companies. They would just say, well, we've got best plans in place and we have some form of a deal in place. But unfortunately, those are the things that, as the world has evolved, you look at a flood, for instance, taking place in Thailand and how that impacts chip making processes for a car manufacturer in South Africa, for argument's sake. And that is where you have to build resilience. So that's not just a business continuity plan. Yes, you require a plan to write and what you're going to do if something like that does happen. You've got to think about these things in your impact assessments. But you have to then say, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to build this? How are we going to get over these things, get through these difficulties? Do we split our suppliers into two so that we have two different suppliers for the same chips, for instance, for our vehicles? And that's how you got to build your resilience in your organizations. You've got to think about what are the things that will impact your business, not just from a process point of view, but the supply chain as a big example. And that is where where you start really thinking about the resilience. And it's a board issue. That's where it should reside.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the world we're living in, Willem, one just gets the feeling that the geopolitical tension and risks are rising. If you look at Taiwan, back to the chip example, and there's a lot of fear around China continuing saber rattling around Taiwan. In Europe, for example, there's a hard pivot to the right, and the bloc seems under a lot of tension. The US is going through its own geopolitical upheavals as well. So I just think globally, if you're a board and you're not thinking about this, I think you're almost being delinquent in your fiduciary responsibilities to the company. You really have to take these risks very seriously. What do you think sets Resilient Innovations apart from other companies in the business continuity management industry in South Africa?
Well, yeah, so I said it's also obviously the experience in the past that we have, and then also the way that we approach a problem like this. For instance, if we do approach it, we'll typically start off with a gap analysis and do a gap analysis. What is it that you physically require? The standard stuff in terms of conducting a business impact assessment, and then after that, doing a strategy in terms of how we're going to do that. Sit down with the board or the exco of that business, talk through the strategy of how you're going to develop your planning to mitigate all of these risks that you are facing, and sit down with the risk team and work through that. After that, you can develop your continuity planning, develop the strategies in terms of your recovery, ensure that your supply chain, all of the people that you work with, that they can provide these services and that their continuity planning and resilience is in place, and that they can actually survive a similar type scenario. Because a scenario that's impacted us quite recently was a undersea cable that went out. And that happened so quick, and all of a sudden the degradation in the total internet in South Africa was massive. So you have to have plans in place to work through those things, because those things, for instance, on a JSE level or trading level, a link like that goes down is seconds count. And if you're sitting at 5 minutes to 5, and you got to close a deal, and there's no time, and it stays open overnight, you're exposed. So it's those kinds of things. So we work through that with clients to think about those risks that they have, and then how to build to become a little bit more resilient in your organization.
And at scale, I mean, when you're talking here, JSE listed company level, often with multiple suppliers, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees, and multiple potential risk areas inside the organization. How is your ability to scale to serve the needs of large organizations?
At the moment, we are definitely still putting all of that back again in place, because a lot of the advisory services was stayed behind in dimension data. So that was the unfortunate part. So we're rebuilding all of that at the moment, but we do have enough capacity and scale to build that to support a large organization. There's a lot of skill available in South Africa around the BCM advisory side of it. And there are some great companies also in South Africa that do this kind of work. But there's the consultants and advisory people are there's quite a number of things in South Africa available.
Yeah, big ecosystem. Looking forward then, what do you think lies ahead for Resilient Innovations as you plan for the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, there's definitely a change in the business continuity management side of things in terms of the physical recovery of office recovery. That has definitely changed. One of the things that we do foresee is where companies, for instance, as a small example, and we'll talk in the next podcast about that is if a company starts to develop a new building and they plan to move on the 1st of June, move into the building the 1st of June, but 6 months go by and they can't move in. That's what you do, because you've got to move out of your other building. And so we offer a lot of service and products around that we do see is expanding, which we'll talk about later. And I think that in South Africa, a lot of companies are going to knowingly and most probably unknowingly look at their own resilience. It's just how it's going to be. And some companies, very small little retailer shop in a small shopping center, doesn't have a generator, is going to buy a generator to continue making food. So people are definitely making those changes and thinking about that.
Absolutely.
And I do see ourselves building it, but we mainly aim for corporate environment and large organizations. That's who we work with. And we have, we've got a substantial client base to prove that.
Absolutely. Well, Willem, I mean, if you look at it, I think resilience is rising up to, the top 3 agenda items at board level in a world, to my earlier points, that is starting to fracture, that is certainly in the South African context, providing more opportunities for potential business interruption, be it with power, water, social instability, all of these things. And then someone decides to dredge something through a cable off our coast, and all of a sudden you've got no internet. So with all of that, I think it makes for a fascinating time to be building out a business continuity management offering like Resilient Innovation. So thanks so much for joining us, Willem Olivier, who's been at the forefront of BCM and the resilience industry for almost the last 3 decades, sharing a little bit more with us here on Business Talk.
Thank you, Michael.